The stars above Virelon shimmered like cold diamonds, their light reflecting across the metal towers of the Galactic Adoption Center. Inside that shining building, filled with laughter and polished glass, there lived a small alien girl named Lyra. She was only 8 cycles old, tiny and fragile, with soft blue skin that glowed faintly under the lights. Her large violet eyes were filled with questions she was too afraid to ask. On her back, 2 thin fins trembled gently every time someone looked her way. She didn't remember her parents. They said her mother had left her here when she was just a baby, and her father was never identified. Half her blood came from the Virelon species, but the other half, no one knew. That made her different. And in this world, different meant unwanted. Every week, new families came through the doors. Tall, elegant aliens dressed in white silks, couples with bright eyes and heavy jewels. They always came searching for a child who looked perfect, one they could show to the world, one that matched their image. The caretakers would line up all the children, smiling and polished, while Lyra waited at the far end of the hall. She tried her best to smile, to keep her fins still, to look kind and gentle. But every time when someone reached her, they hesitated. Their eyes changed. Their smiles faded. "She's mixed," one said quietly. "Not pure Virelon," another whispered. And then they would turn away. Lyra watched them go, clutching her small blanket. It was the only thing she had left from her mother, a soft gray fabric with a stitched star in the corner. She always told herself the same words before sleeping. "Someone will come. Someone will want me." But she was not sure she believed them anymore. The caretakers were not cruel, but they were tired. The galaxy was full of orphans, full of children abandoned after wars and border conflicts. Lyra was just one small name in a sea of forgotten faces. She tried to be useful. She cleaned the hallways when others played. She helped feed the younger ones, brushing their hair and whispering stories about faraway worlds. When they cried, she wiped their tears even though no one wiped hers. Sometimes at night, she climbed to the window and looked at the stars. She imagined her father among them, searching for her. Maybe he was a brave explorer, or maybe he had died in some battle. She didn't know, but it made her heart ache in a way she couldn't explain. One morning, a new family arrived, tall creatures from the silver moons of Leora. Their bodies shimmered like glass and their voices were soft music. Everyone said they were kind. The caretakers whispered that maybe finally this family would choose her. Lyra spent an hour brushing her small fins until they shone. She put on her cleanest tunic, the one patched 3 times but still neat. She stood in line, her small hands clasped in front of her chest, her heart beating so fast it hurt. The couple smiled at each child. They knelt, asked names, touched heads gently. And when they reached Lyra for a moment, she saw hope. The woman even smiled until her husband leaned close and whispered something. The woman's eyes changed, cold, distant. She straightened and said politely, "She seems fragile, maybe not the right match." Then they walked away. Lyra's throat closed. The sound of their footsteps faded and she stared at the floor, her reflection swimming in her tears. The caretaker sighed softly and put a hand on her shoulder but said nothing. What words could fix a heart that kept being broken the same way again and again? That night she didn't eat. She sat by the window, blanket around her shoulders, and watched the ships fly across the sky. Each glowing trail looked like a family leaving her behind. "Why am I never enough?" she whispered. No one answered. Days turned into weeks. More families came, more went. No one chose her. Some of the other children got adopted, waving goodbye with wide smiles. Lyra always smiled back for them, but when they were gone, her heart felt smaller. Then one evening, as the lights dimmed and the night shift began, the front doors opened again. The guards looked up in surprise. A man stood there, tall, wearing a worn jacket and dusty boots. His skin was warm brown, his eyes deep and gentle. A human. Humans rarely came this far from their colonies. They were strange to most species, loud, emotional, and unpredictable. Lyra blinked at him through the glass. He didn't look rich. He didn't look like the others. But there was something about his eyes, something that made her heart stir, a warmth she hadn't felt in years. The caretaker greeted him nervously. "Can I help you, traveler?" The man smiled softly and said, "Yeah, I heard you've got some kids here who need a home." And for the first time in her life, Lyra felt the air change, like the universe itself had taken a quiet breath, waiting to see what would happen next. The next morning, the Galactic Adoption Center was filled with whispers. A human had come, a real one. Humans were rare in this sector of the galaxy. Most species called them strange, too soft, too emotional, too unpredictable. They didn't follow the same cold logic that other races did. Some admired their courage, others feared their chaos. But no one ever expected a human to walk into a Viewership adoption center, especially not one as small and quiet as this. The man's name was Elias Kane. He was a cargo pilot who traveled between colonies, delivering supplies to remote worlds. His ship wasn't fancy. His clothes were old and patched in places, his boots scuffed from long journeys. But his smile was warm, steady, and kind. When the caretaker introduced him to the group of children, they all gathered nervously. Some hid behind each other, others stared in curiosity. Lyra stayed near the back of the room as she always did, clutching her gray blanket. Elias knelt down so he was at eye level with the children. "Hey there," he said in a calm, friendly voice. "I'm Elias. You can call me Eli if you want." He didn't speak like the other visitors. No rehearsed lines, no polite distance. He spoke like a friend. One by one, the children introduced themselves. Elias smiled at each, asked about their hobbies, their favorite foods, their dreams. He listened carefully, nodding, laughing softly, sometimes even joking. The caretakers watched in silence. They weren't used to someone actually listening to the children. When he finally reached the back of the room, his eyes fell on Lyra. She froze, unsure what to do. No one ever came all the way to her end. Elias tilted his head slightly. "And who's this quiet one hiding back here?" Lyra blinked and whispered, "Lyra, Lyra," he repeated softly as if testing the sound. "That's a beautiful name." Her fins twitched shyly. "Thank you," he smiled. "You like to draw?" She frowned, confused. "Draw?" Elias took something from his jacket pocket, a small folded piece of paper. He unfolded it and showed her a simple pencil sketch of a ship flying past a planet. "I made this," he said. "When I'm waiting for cargo to load, I draw. Keeps my hands busy." Lyra's eyes widened. "That's pretty," he chuckled. "You can keep it if you want." Her small hands trembled as she took the paper. "For me?" "Of course," he said. "You look like someone who'd take care of it." For the first time in a long while, Lyra smiled. It was small and uncertain, but it was real. Elias spent the whole day talking to the children, helping them build tiny models out of scraps and wires. When he left, the caretaker asked if he had anyone in mind. He rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "Maybe. I'd like to come back tomorrow." The caretaker was surprised. "You would? You don't need to rush, Captain Kane." Elias smiled faintly. "I'm not rushing. I'm just—" Sure, the next day he returned with snacks, strange earth foods in bright wrappers that smelled sweet and salty. The children laughed as he showed them how to eat them. Most made faces. The taste was unusual to alien tongues, but Lyra liked the chocolate the best. She giggled softly when the melted bit stuck to her fingers. Elias handed her a napkin, pretending not to notice that she was saving half of it for later. They sat together on the floor, and Elias started folding another piece of paper. Lyra watched closely as his rough hands moved gently, folding edges and corners until a small paper star appeared. He placed it in her palm. "You keep this," he said. "It's a lucky star. Whenever you're sad, hold it tight and remember that someone out there cares about you." Her eyes shimmered. "No one's ever given me something before." "Well," Elias said softly, "then it's about time someone did." The other caretakers watched this strange connection forming and grew uneasy. That night, one of them spoke to Elias. "You're kind, Captain Kane," she said carefully, "but maybe you don't understand. She's not like the others. Her genes are mixed. She might not fit into your world." Elias leaned back in his chair, calm but firm. "Then maybe I'll make my world fit hers." The caretaker had no answer. She had heard many reasons to reject children, but never one like that. When Elias came again on the third day, Lyra was already waiting by the door. She didn't say anything at first. She just ran to him and hugged his leg. He froze, startled, then slowly placed a hand on her head. "Hey there, Starshine," he said softly. "You miss me already?" She nodded. "You came back." "Of course I did," he smiled. "I promised, didn't I?" Her fins fluttered happily. No one had ever promised her anything before. And for the first time in her life, she began to believe that maybe this man, this human, was different. Somewhere deep inside her heart, a small flame began to glow. It was the first spark of something she had never truly felt before: hope. Days turned into weeks, and Elias Kane kept coming back. At first, the caretakers thought it was just curiosity. They had seen it before, travelers who visited once or twice, drawn by pity, then left when the feeling faded. But Elias wasn't like them. Every time his cargo ship docked near Viralon, he came straight to the adoption center, carrying a small bag of earth treats and a new story to tell. He didn't treat Lyra like a fragile creature or a problem to be solved. He talked to her as if she was someone who mattered, someone real. They sat together in the courtyard every visit. Lyra would listen with wide eyes as Elias told stories about strange planets covered in forests, oceans, and skies that smelled of rain. He described Earth, a world of blue and green where wind carried the scent of flowers and soil. To her, it sounded like a dream. "Are there really animals there?" she asked one day. "Oh, plenty," he said, grinning. "Big ones, small ones, some that fly, some that swim, some that just steal your food when you're not looking," she giggled. "Sounds scary." Elias shook his head. "Not just alive. That's what Earth is. Full of life." She closed her eyes, imagining it. A world that wasn't made of steel and light, but of grass and trees. Each time he visited, he brought her something small. A pencil, a folded paper bird, a music chip with Earth lullabies. But her favorite was the paper star. He had made it for her one evening, sitting cross-legged on the floor while she watched in silence. His fingers were rough yet gentle, folding the corners carefully. When he finished, he placed the tiny star in her palm. "When you feel lonely," he said softly, "hold this. It means someone somewhere is thinking of you." Lyra held the star close to her chest. The paper was simple, but it felt heavier than any jewel. It carried warmth, human warmth, something she had never felt before. She whispered, "Thank you, Elias." He smiled. "You can call me Eli if you like." Her fins fluttered softly. "Eli," she repeated. The name felt strange and beautiful on her tongue. The caretakers began to notice the change in her. Lyra was smiling more, speaking louder, even helping others with newfound energy. The quiet, trembling child who once hid from every visitor now waited by the doors each day, eyes bright, hoping to see that familiar brown jacket. But not everyone was pleased. One afternoon, as Elias filled out some papers at the front desk, one of the senior caretakers spoke up quietly. "Captain Kane," she said, her tone polite but cold. "You've been visiting quite often. You do realize she's not fully virulent?" Elias didn't look up. "Yes, I know." "She has human traits," the caretaker continued, lowering her voice. "That's what makes her so unusual. Her DNA record is incomplete. We can't even tell what her father was." "Are you sure this is wise?" Elias finally raised his head, his eyes steady. "Tell me something," he said. "Does that change the fact that she's a kid who needs someone?" The caretaker hesitated. "No, but—" he cut her off gently. "Then I think that's all that matters." There was silence after that. Later that night, when the halls were quiet, Lyra sat beside Elias in the dim light of the recreation room. They were coloring on paper, something she loved now because of him. She asked suddenly, "Why do you come back, Eli?" He smiled, not looking up. "Because I like talking to you." "But you have a ship," she said. "You can go anywhere." "Yeah," he said softly. "But most places aren't worth much without someone waiting for you." Her small fingers froze on the paper. No one had ever said anything like that to her. She looked at him quietly for a long moment and whispered, "Do you think someone could really want me?" Elias looked up. "I don't think it, kid." "I know it." When he left that night, Lyra ran after him. She pressed the folded paper star back into his hand. "It's for you now," she said. "So you remember me?" He looked down at her, surprised, then gently closed her fingers back around the star. "Keep it," he said. "You need it more than I do." She clutched it tight as he walked away, his boots echoing softly down the metallic hall. And as the doors closed, she whispered into the empty air, "Please come back. Eli, please don't forget me." Her voice trembled with fear. But beneath that fear was something new, something bright, a fragile hope that maybe, this time, she wouldn't be left behind. The day Elias Kane submitted the adoption request, the entire Galactic Adoption Center went silent. No one had expected it. Not the caretakers, not the children, not even Lyra herself. For a few seconds, she just stared at the document in his hands, unable to believe the words written there. Applicant, Elias Kane. Desired adoptee, Lyra. Her name. Her name was on the paper. She pressed her small hands to her mouth, her fins trembling so fast they made a soft hum. You mean it? She whispered. Elias smiled gently. Of course I mean it, kid. I told you. Family's about choice, and I'm choosing you. She threw her arms around him, sobbing into his chest. He held her tight, his rough pilot's hands careful and warm. For the first time in her life, someone wasn't walking away. Someone was walking toward her, but not everyone was happy about it. By the next day, the news had spread far beyond the center. A human adopting a non-human child, and a half-blood one at that, became the latest scandal on the galactic networks. Talk shows debated it. Journalists called it an emotional stunt. Some alien politicians even called it genetic contamination. This is absurd, one council member said on live broadcast. Humans are unpredictable, emotional beings. What makes them think they can raise a hybrid child? Others mocked Elias directly. A lonely cargo pilot looking for attention, they sneered. He should stick to hauling supplies, not playing hero. Elias didn't care. He turned off the screens, but Lyra heard the whispers. She saw the headlines whenever the caretakers scrolled their feeds. Human man adopts alien child, a madness or miracle. Half-blood girl taken by Earthman, dangerous or brave. She didn't understand most of the words, but she understood the tone, the coldness, the disgust. She began to wonder if maybe she was a mistake. That evening, when Elias came to visit, she was sitting alone in the courtyard, her knees pulled to her chest. He sat beside her quietly. You've been awfully quiet today, Starshine. She hesitated, then whispered, Everyone's angry. He sighed. Yeah, people get scared when they see something they don't understand. Her voice trembled. Maybe they're right. Maybe I don't belong anywhere. Elias turned to her, his expression firm but kind. Lyra, look at me. She lifted her eyes. You belong wherever you are loved, he said. Not where you're approved of. Love doesn't need permission. She stared at him, her eyes glassy. Even if the whole galaxy says it's wrong? He smiled faintly. Then the whole galaxy's wrong. The official review took weeks. Inspectors visited Elias's ship, tested Lyra's DNA again, interviewed them both. They asked cold questions about money, species, education, biology, as if love could be measured in data, one of them. A tall Varellan officer looked at Lyra and said sharply, You do realize you'll never look human? People will stare. They'll talk. Lyra lowered her head, but Elias spoke before she could. Then they'll just have to get used to it, he said. The officer frowned. You're aware this could hurt your reputation? Elias chuckled softly. I haul cargo for a living, not popularity. The officer had no answer. One night, while waiting for the results, Lyra had a nightmare. She dreamed of all the families who had turned away from her, their eyes filled with rejection, their voices full of cold pity. She woke up crying, her fins quivering with fear. Elias found her sitting by the small window of her dorm, clutching the paper star he had given her. He sat down beside her and pulled her gently into his arms. It's just a dream, he whispered. You're safe now. Through tears, she asked, What if they say no, Eli? What if they don't let you take me? He brushed her hair softly and said, Then I'll fight for you, however long it takes. Her heart ached at his words. No one had ever said they would fight for her before. 2 days later, the decision arrived. The message appeared on the center's screen. Adoption approved. Custody granted to Elias Kane. Lyra froze, staring at the words as if they might disappear. Then she screamed with joy, running straight into Elias's arms. He laughed, spinning her in the air as her fins fluttered like wings. The caretakers watched, some with tears, some still unsure. But when Elias looked down at her, eyes full of pride and peace, everyone in the room felt something shift. Maybe this wasn't wrong. Maybe this was what hope looked like. And as they walked out together, hand in hand, the crowd of reporters shouted questions, cameras flashing like lightning. Elias didn't answer any of them. He just looked at Lyra and said quietly, Ready to go home, kid? She nodded, her eyes shining. Yes, Dad. It was the first time she had ever said that word. And for Elias Kane, that single word made every storm worth it. The first time Lyra stepped onto Elias Kane's ship, she thought she was dreaming. The ship wasn't big or shiny like the ones that came to the adoption center. It was old, covered in scratches, and smelled faintly of oil and smoke. But to her it was beautiful, because it was home now. She followed Elias through the narrow corridors, her small fins fluttering in excitement. He opened each door like a magician showing treasures. "This here's the cockpit," he said proudly. "That's where the magic happens." She stared at the blinking lights and levers with wide eyes. "Can I touch it?" He laughed. "Not yet, Starshine. Maybe after a few lessons." Next, he showed her a small cabin with a soft bed, glowing lights, and a round window that looked out into space. "This one's yours," he said. "Mine," she whispered. "Yep, every captain needs her quarters." She climbed onto the bed, feeling the soft blanket under her hands. For a long moment she just sat there silent, taking it in. Then she looked up at him and said softly, "No one ever gave me my own room before." Elias smiled gently. "Well, get used to it, kid. You're part of this crew now." Life on the Starling, that was the ship's name, was noisy, messy, and full of surprises. Elias had a small crew of 3. Juno, a tall Martian mechanic with red eyes and a loud laugh. Rix, a short reptilian navigator who loved old Earth songs. And a droid named Patch who constantly complained about organics making chaos. At first, Lyra was shy around them. She spoke little and stayed close to Elias. But slowly she began to open up. Juno taught her how to use tools and fix small parts of the ship. Rix showed her constellations and told stories about human explorers. Even Patch, the grumpy droid, eventually started greeting her with, "Good morning, small biological disturbance." Elias watched it all with quiet pride. Every evening he would sit with her by the window as stars drifted past like falling snow. They'd talk about small things, favorite foods, dreams, the places they wanted to visit. Lyra's favorite question was always, "What's Earth like?" Elias would smile and describe it again and again. Blue skies, green fields, oceans that go on forever. "You'd love it, kid. You'd run through the grass and laugh till you couldn't breathe." Sometimes her eyes filled with wonder. Other times she just closed them, imagining the sound of waves she had never heard. One day, while cleaning the ship's kitchen, she accidentally knocked over a whole pot of soup. It splashed everywhere, staining the floor. She froze, panic flashing through her eyes. "I'm sorry," she cried. "I'm sorry, please don't." Elias turned quickly at her voice. She was trembling, hands shaking as if she expected punishment. Hey, slow down," he said, kneeling beside her. "It's just soup, Lyra. Nobody's hurt." "But I made a mess," she said weakly. He smiled softly and took the mop. "Then we'll clean it, together." She stared at him, confused. "You're not angry." "Angry?" He chuckled. "Kid, I've spilled worse things than soup. Once dropped a whole barrel of engine oil on myself. Smelled like a mechanic for a week." She giggled, wiping her eyes. And when she took the mop from him, he saw something beautiful. A little spark of confidence shining quietly inside her. Weeks passed. Lyra learned fast. She memorized the ship's maps, fixed small panels, and even helped Rix calculate routes. When Elias gave her a small pilot's headset, she treated it like a crown. "Now you're my co-pilot," he said. Her face glowed with pride. "Co-pilot Lyra Kane, ready for duty." Elias saluted her playfully. "That's my girl." Every time he said those words, "my girl," something inside her heart healed a little more. One night, the crew celebrated a successful cargo run. Lyra sat beside Elias, eating noodles and laughing at Juno's terrible jokes. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel like an outsider. She wasn't the half-blood child no one wanted. She was part of something real. As the others went to sleep, she sat with Elias by the window, watching the stars drift by. "Do you think I'll ever be as brave as you?" she asked quietly. Elias looked at her, his face calm and warm. "Lyra, you're already braver than you know. You survived being alone. You kept hope alive when no one gave you a reason to. That's real courage," her eyes shimmered. "I'm glad you came for me." He reached into his jacket and pulled out the same paper star, a little worn now, but still shining softly under the cabin light. He placed it in her palm again. "Never forget," he said. "You're not alone anymore." She held the star close to her heart and whispered, I know, Dad. Outside, the stars stretched endlessly across the dark sky, ring cold, distant, and eternal. But inside that little ship, one small, fragile girl finally felt warm. And for Elias Kane, that was all that ever mattered. It happened on a quiet night. The Starling was gliding through the edge of the Solari Belt, a stretch of space known for drifting ice rocks and old mining debris. Elias had taken that route many times before. It was supposed to be safe. Lyra sat beside him in the cockpit wearing her co-pilot headset. The two of them were laughing over a story Rix had told earlier about accidentally navigating into a wedding parade on a royal planet. Everything felt peaceful. Then the radar started to beep. Elias frowned. That's odd. We're not near any traffic lanes. Before he could say another word, a streak of light flashed past the window, then another, then hundreds. Meteor shower, Rick shouted from the control room. A big one. The ship shuddered as the first wave hit. Metal groaned, alarm screamed, and lights flickered. Lyra grabbed her seat, her heart pounding in her chest. Elias tightened his grip on the controls. Hold on, kid. We're gonna dance through this storm. The Starling swerved and rolled, engines roaring as meteors the size of boulders streaked by. Sparks flew across the cockpit glass. Juno's voice came through the intercom. Shields are dropping. We've got a hull breach on deck 2. I'll handle it. Elias barked. Rix, keep me updated on trajectory. Lyra, stay with me. Lyra nodded, though her hands trembled. She'd never seen Elias look this serious. The ship jolted again, tossing them sideways. Lyra's chair restraints snapped loose, and she nearly fell until Elias reached out and caught her arm. Easy. You okay? She nodded quickly, fear glimmering in her wide eyes. He smiled through the chaos. That's my brave co-pilot. Down in the corridor, lights flickered like dying stars. Juno and Patch were trying to seal the hull leak, shouting over the roar of escaping air. But the storm wasn't slowing down. A huge meteor grazed the side of the ship, tearing a deep scar into the metal. The engines coughed and sputtered. Captain! Rix yelled. We've lost the stabilizer! We're spinning! Elias gritted his teeth. Not today. He slammed the manual override, trying to steady the ship. Sparks burst from the console. The heat was intense, the noise deafening. Lyra's hands shook, but she forced herself to watch the readings. She remembered what Elias had taught her. Don't let fear make you freeze. I can do this, she whispered to herself. When another meteor hit, Elias was thrown back, his shoulder slamming against the seat. He winced but kept control. Lyra saw blood on his arm. Dad, she cried out. You're hurt. Not bad, he grunted. Focus, Lyra, keep an eye on the engine temp. She swallowed hard and checked the screen. It was glowing red, too hot. It's overheating! Then vent the excess plasma, he said. Switch for blue. Her fingers moved fast. She pulled the switch, remembering the lessons from their long nights together. The engines cooled slightly and the ship steadied. That's it, Elias said, pride in his voice even through the pain. You're doing great. But another impact shook the ship violently. Sparks exploded above them, and the control panel died with a loud pop. Smoke filled the cockpit. Elias coughed, blinking through the haze. Manual steering's gone. What do we do? He looked at her, eyes calm even as alarms screamed. You're gonna help me land her, kid. Just like we practiced, her breath caught. But what if I mess up? Then we'll mess up together, he said with a grin. She nodded, wiping tears from her eyes. Together they gripped the emergency controls, guiding the failing ship toward a small moon nearby. The descent was rough. The Starling tore through the thin atmosphere, shaking like it would rip apart any second. Lyra's heart raced, but Elias's steady voice kept her focused. Adjust pitch. Keep her level. That's it. Good girl. When the ship finally hit the ground, it skidded across the rocky surface, leaving a trail of smoke and fire behind. Then silence. Lyra's head spun. Everything hurt. She looked over and saw Elias slumped against the seat, eyes closed, blood running down his arm. Dad, she cried, shaking him gently. Please wake up. He groaned softly, opening one eye. Still here, Starshine. Tears streamed down her cheeks, half from fear and half from relief. She pressed her small hands against his wound. You saved us, he smiled faintly. No? We saved us. Outside, the dust settled. The ship was damaged but alive, just like its crew. Rick's and Juno's voices came through the comm, full of relief and laughter. Captain, Lyra. You two still breathing? Elias leaned back, breathing hard. Still kicking. Lyra looked out at the strange, quiet moon, glowing silver under distant stars. For the first time, she realized she hadn't been afraid at the end, not really. Because she wasn't alone anymore. She turned to Elias and whispered, "We did it." He smiled, eyes tired but proud. "Yeah, kid. You're a real Cain now." And as the starling rested beneath the soft starlight, the universe, and vast and cold as ever, seemed just a little warmer around them. Morning came slowly to the silent moon. A soft light spread across the cracked ground where the starling rested, half buried in silver dust. Smoke rose gently from the ship's wounded hull, and the air was cold enough to sting the skin. Lyra woke first. Her body ached and her clothes were covered in soot, but she didn't care. The first thing she did was crawl over to Elias, still resting in the pilot's chair. His face was pale, his arm bandaged roughly from the night before. "Dad," she whispered. He stirred, blinking tiredly, then smiled. "Morning, Starshine." She let out a shaky breath, half relief, half tears. "You scared me," he chuckled softly. "Wouldn't be the first time I gave someone a heart attack." But his voice was weak. She could see how exhausted he was, so she helped him up, careful and gentle like he always was with her. The crew gathered outside a few hours later. Juno and Rix had patched the worst of the damage. The Starling could still fly, but not far, when one of the engines was dead. "We'll need a rescue tug," Juno said, frowning. "We can send a distress signal, but it might take days." Elias nodded. "We'll make do till then. Everyone check supplies. Lyra, you're with me." She followed him outside, where the horizon glowed faintly with sunlight. The air shimmered with quiet beauty. For a moment, everything felt peaceful again. Elias sat down on a rock, wincing as his arm throbbed. Lyra sat beside him. Neither spoke for a long while. Finally, he said softly, "You handled yourself well up there." She looked down, her fins drooping slightly. "I was so scared," he nodded. "That's normal. Being brave doesn't mean you're not afraid. It means you act even when you are." She looked at him then, really looked, at the tired lines on his face, the scars on his hands, the softness in his eyes, and she realized something she'd never truly said aloud. "I love you," she whispered. He froze for just a second, then smiled, eyes shining with quiet emotion. "I love you too, kid." It was the first time anyone had ever said those words to her. They weren't loud or fancy. They didn't echo through space, but they filled every empty place in her heart. Later, while the others rested, Lyra walked alone across the moon's surface. The stars above stretched endlessly, cold and bright, just like the ones she used to watch through the glass at the adoption center. But now, when she looked at them, they didn't feel lonely anymore. She remembered all the alien families who had turned her away, the ones who whispered that she didn't belong anywhere, that she wasn't enough, that she wasn't one of them. And yet here she was, alive, brave, and loved by a human who had seen her worth when no one else did. She knelt down and pulled the small paper star from her pocket. It was wrinkled and worn, a little burned at the edge, but it still glowed faintly under the light. Elias's voice echoed in her mind. "You're not alone anymore." She smiled and whispered to the wind. "You were right." "Dad, I'm not." Then she looked up at the sky, whispering softly, "I'm Lyra Cain, human enough for me." Hours later, the rescue ship arrived, a large silver craft that descended gently through the thin clouds. The crew cheered as it landed nearby. But before they boarded, Lyra turned back to the Starling. The ship looked battered and old, but she loved every dent and scratch. It had been her first real home. Elias limped over beside her. "She's a tough old bird," he said proudly. "So am I," she said, smiling up at him. He laughed, ruffling her hair. "You sure are, Starshine." They walked toward the rescue ship together, hand in hand. And for the first time in her life, Lyra didn't look back with sadness, only gratitude, because she finally understood that home wasn't a place or a ship or even a planet. It was a person, and hers was standing right beside her. Months later, after the Starling was repaired, they took her back into the stars. This time, Lyra sat proudly in the co-pilot's chair, wearing a new headset and a jacket just like Elias's. A small patch on the shoulder read L. Cain. As they lifted off, she pressed the paper star against the window and whispered, Thank you. The engines roared and the ship soared upward, cutting through the dark like a promise. Elias looked over and said, "Ready for another adventure, co-pilot?" She grinned. Always. And as the stars spread out before them, vast, endless, and bright, the little girl who was once rejected by every world finally flew free with the only family she would ever need, a human who called her his own. And meant it.